Welcome to today's special collaboration video with History Roadshow about Jeanne d'Arc. Jeanne d'Arc was probably born during the 100 Years' War at her father's farm next to the church of Domrémy, which is a village located on the borders of Champagne, Barrois and Lorraine. The exact date of Jeanne's birth remains historically uncertain, as no parish register was kept in Domrémy at the time, but several historical sources retain the year 1412 as the correct year of her birth. Jeanne was the daughter of Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle Romée. She was a very pious child and is known to have gone on a pilgrimage every Sunday to the chapel of Bermont to pray there. During her daily life in Domrémy, Jeanne would have occupied herself with housework such as cooking and cleaning, spinning wool, or helping with the harvest. Jeanne d'Arc claimed to have heard voices for the first time when she was 13 years old, while in her father's garden. During her trial, Jeanne stated that the voices at first frightened her. Later during the trial, Jeanne identified the voices as being those of Saint Catherine, Saint Margaret and the Archangel Michael, asking her to free France from the English invaders and to lead Charles VII to the throne of France. When Jeanne heard the news of the siege of Orléans in late 1428, her voices became more pressing and Jeanne requested her father's permission to go to a nearby village on the pretext of helping with the recovery of a family member who was ill. Instead, Jeanne was taken to meet Robert de Baudricourt, the captain of Vaucouleurs. Jeanne requested the Baudricourts' help for her to join the king's troops, but the Baudricourt took her for a madwoman and sent her back to Domrémy. Jeanne returned to Vaucouleurs in 1429. The young illiterate peasant girl, who had great charisma, gained the local population's support. She was eventually taken seriously by the Baudricourt, and he provided her with the means to travel to Chinon. Before leaving for Chinon, Jeanne d'Arc changed into men's clothes and had her hair cut in a hairstyle in the male fashion of the time. She kept this type of dress and hairstyle until her death. Jeanne d'Arc arrived safely in Chinon, where she was finally allowed to see Charles VII, who had been informed of her arrival by the Baudricourt. Legend has it that Jeanne was able to recognize Charles VII without being introduced to him while he was standing among his courtiers. In reality, however, she was received by Charles in his private flats instead of in the Great Hall. During an interview, Jeanne told him about her mission. The grand reception before the court that gave rise to Jeanne's legend did not take place until a month later, when Jeanne clearly announced 4 events to take place: the liberation of Orléans, the coronation of the king in Reims, the liberation of Paris, and the release of the Duke of Orléans. As it was necessary to establish Jeanne's femininity and virginity, she was examined by the wives of Robert de Baudricourt and Robert le Maçon, supervised by Yolande d'Aragon, who was the king's mother-in-law. Then she was questioned by a council of clerics and doctors of theology in Poitiers, who advised the king to ask her for a sign to show that she was indeed speaking in God's name. Jeanne countered the suggestion of the council by promising to lift the siege of Orléans. Charles agreed, and Jeanne left for Orléans on April 17, 1429. Upon her arrival in Orléans, on April 19, Jeanne was enthusiastically welcomed by the population. With her faith, confidence and enthusiasm, she managed to provide the desperate French soldiers with new energy and forced the English to lift the siege of the city. Because of this victory, Jeanne was nicknamed the Maid of Orléans. After another victory, with which Jeanne secured the Loire Valley, she persuaded the king to travel to Reims to be officially crowned King of France. Charles VII agreed and was crowned King of France in the Cathedral of Reims on July 17, 1429. The political and psychological effect of Charles's coronation was immense. As Reims was in the heart of the Burgundian-controlled territory and held high symbolic value, the coronation was interpreted by many at the time as the result of divine will. It legitimized Charles VII, who was disinherited by the Treaty of Troyes. After the coronation, Jeanne tried to convince the king to capture Paris from the Burgundians and the English, but Charles hesitated. Nonetheless, Jeanne led the attack on Paris on September 8, 1429, but she was wounded during the attack on the Porte Saint-Honoré. The king's army retreated and Jeanne was taken back to the village of La Chapelle. The king now forbade any further military actions due to the lack of money and supplies. But Jeanne set off on another campaign again. From then on, she led her own troops and considered herself an independent war leader, no longer representing the king. Her endeavors, however, weren't successful. In October, Jeanne took part in a successful siege of Saint-Pierre-le-Moutier alongside the royal army, and on November 23, they laid siege to La Charité-sur-Loire. But after a month, the siege was abandoned and Jeanne returned to Jargeau following the failure of the siege. At the beginning of 1430, Jeanne was invited to stay with the king in the Château La Trémoille in Sully-sur-Loire. But without the permission of the king, Jeanne left and headed a company of volunteers on a campaign to Compiègne, which was besieged by the Burgundians. There, Jeanne was captured, and she was sold to the English on November 21, 1430, after which she was taken to Rouen, where the English headquarters were located. For the conclusion of this story, I now hand you over to John of History Roadshow.
When Joan arrived at Rouen on the 23rd of December 1430, she would be welcomed by 5 guards, 3 of whom would remain in her cell. She had been shackled and continually criticised by the men, and it was reported an iron cage was placed within the cell, but this is more likely to have been used as a further way to intimidate. So angry were her captors that they threatened that even if she attempted to escape, this would be classed as heresy. It was a horrific time for a girl just 19 years old, emotionally wrecked by the ongoing events, yet Joan provided a steely argument to all those who threw accusations at her. Pierre Courchon was a French bishop in charge of the whole affair, and would in his wisdom need more evidence to convict Joan. He sent away one of his men, but that returned nothing. But this meant little to the overall indictment, as the charges would be purely based on Joan's words alone. Joan's trial began on the 21st of February 1431. It was held in the Royal Chapel at Rouen Castle. She was faced with a daunting lineup of men who opposed her and clamoured to see her fall. Joan's appearance, as expected, was still shocking to those who had not yet seen her up until this point. She was pale and distressed after a long, arduous time in custody. The examination into Joan began with questions on her background, childhood and life, including her faith. By the 26th of March, Joan had been subject to 6 public sessions and at least 9 in private. The prosecutor, Jean de would begin to write the charges against her. A total of 70 got the ball rolling, but this ridiculous number was eventually reduced to just 12 due to a complete lack of evidence. Before her trial had begun, 2 men had been placed in her cell, pretending to be prisoners from her home region. This, of course, was nothing more than a deceitful way to get Joan to incriminate herself, and showed the lengths her captors would go to attempt a conviction by any means. Joan was cunning. Although she had no defence counsel, she cleverly frustrated her interrogators. Although she was asked to confirm her answers and be truthful, Joan declined and said, "It is possible that the questions you ask of me I may not answer, as I have sworn not to tell." One question that was asked pertained to the possibility as to whether Joan thought she was in the grace of God. Joan knew if she answered this by saying yes, it would contradict church belief, as they stated no one knew the answer to that question, and so would only convict herself of heresy. But Joan replied, "If I am not, then hopefully God will place me there." This was an answer her jurors had not expected, and those present were baffled by her reply. Joan said she desired three things: her freedom, help for France, and her salvation, although she probably knew deep down she would die. Yet a small hope still lingered that she may be allowed to walk free. The questioning then turned to her belief in saints and their opinions on the ongoing war. Does God hate the English? Joan replied, I know nothing of God's love or hate for the English. I know they will be driven from France, except those who die here. A further question about her banner and why it was the only one at the coronation of Charles VII. She again replied, it had been present at many perils, and that was enough for it to be honoured. But this odd questioning again was only directed at her, as if the banner could be proven to have magical powers. It could have said Joan was a witch, and the devil helped Charles become king. Joan often wore men's clothing. This aggravated the prosecution. Joan described that her wearing such clothes was something she was free to do, and if the church felt so strongly, maybe they should ask God themselves. It was split. Some churchmen found her clothing distasteful, while others, including Charles VII, did not argue. As for what she did, this type of clothing was necessary and practical. Prosecutors were now at the end of their wits. Frustration in what at the time seemed like an easy target was proving to be much more complex than even they first imagined. Joan continued to assert her belief, stating she had not been faulty in our Christian beliefs. However, she insisted that she would not be averse to seeing her argument go to the Pope, Martin V. But Cauchon refused, as this might well lead to her release. Finally, on the 5th of June, the complete list of charges was noted, 12 in total. It all summed up a perfectly fuel-filled hatred for this woman, yet if Joan had been on their side, nothing she had done would have been judged a crime. According to Cauchon, the maid was guilty, and now she had to admit to the crimes. On the 16th of April 1431, Joan became ill after eating fish. It's unsure if it was poison, but the fever continued, and at times it looked like she may not recover. Yet she did, but this would only become the start of further questions, and worse. On the 9th of May, Joan was threatened with torture. She was taken to the Great Tower at Rouen, shown the implement, and again asked the same questions to gain a conviction, and again under more duress. Joan said, if you finally tear me to shreds and send my soul from my body, I will never talk again, and if I did, it would be under your forceful treatment. Now Cauchon gathered his men for one last attempt to be done with this, and to ask if torture should be used. Although no confession was forthcoming from Joan, prosecutors thought they had enough. Firstly, not to torture, but secondly, to convict without further delay. On the 24th of May, her guard took her to a cemetery. Joan thought she was to be killed there and then, but they gave her an option, either sign a declaration of guilt or be burnt at the stake. Joan signed. It was her admittance of guilt and renounced her previous behaviour. Joan now asked to be taken back to where she had come from, and she thought the matter was closed and accepted the imprisonment. Her idea, however, turned out to be very optimistic. She was placed in women's clothes and chained once again back inside her cell. Her attire didn't last long, and Joan reverted to wearing men's clothes, now a punishable act that could lead to death. If Joan were found in this state by Cauchon, he would have no choice but now to claim her as a heretic. Joan, under constant attack, claimed she would not wear the clothes of men if they stopped attacking her, and that if she were to be kept in prison, it should be under the guidance of women. Cauchon said it was now all over, and Joan would not survive the outcome of her trial. At 8 o'clock on the 30th of May 1431, Joan was led to Rouen old marketplace. A large crowd had gathered. She had been pronounced as a relapsed heretic who had profaned the name of God. She asked for a cross and was given a small wooden one. This was placed inside her dress. Her final words, uttered many times, were simply, Jesus, before the flames took hold and Joan of Arc died. No one had attempted to stop the execution, and it was said that many were distressed by the whole event. One onlooker said that a dove had flown by during her last moments and believed those responsible had killed a saint. A priest from the church of Rouen wept. and declared he wished his soul was now at the place where this girl currently resides. Joan's death had to be confirmed, and she would have her body burnt again to eradicate any last signs. Then her ashes were scattered in the River Seine to stop anyone from collecting them as holy relics. To this day, Joan is revered across France, and at the site of her death stands a magnificent monument. Saint Joan was not only courageous and dedicated, but had an intense desire to do the right thing, making this lady one of the world's most appealing leaders and one whose enduring inspiration will never be forgotten.
Are you interested in seeing more of John's great history content? Make sure to check out History Roadshow, where aside from great English and Scottish historical figures, you can also watch videos on prominent international men and women. John also hosts live streams where you and other viewers can share thoughts and ideas on history's greatest events and characters. Make sure to subscribe to his channel so you won't miss any of it. On behalf of John and I, thank you for watching.